Hello and welcome back to How to D&D More Good with me, Dread Roberts. Today I've got a friend of mine I've known for many, many years actually. It's been quite a while. Joe, hi.
Hi, how you doing, Dread?
I'm very good, thanks. Yeah, welcome to my podcast. So
Fun to be on.
today we are going to talk more about, I guess, the crazy world of LARP, which is which is how we know each other. And we've been, God, it's been a while. I don't know,
Doing this for
10?
10 years.
Wow.
It's actually the 10th year that we've been doing this at the LT together.
Nice. So I wish it was my 10th year of LT. It's a lot longer than that. I feel old all of a sudden. It came up in conversation that I've been DMing tabletop role-playing games for like 21, 22 years, which I'll probably say every fucking video, but... but yeah, so first preamble, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history with the world of RPGs in general?
Okay, so I got into standard tabletop role-playing games and I started sixth form college, where I didn't really understand what I was doing because that's what happens when you encounter D&D for the first time. Properly got into it again at university. They also had a live-action role-play society kind of tagged to it, doing a sci-fi game inspired by Firefly. That was good fun. Fantasy 1 came along later in my final year, and I kind of progressed into the LT where I already had some friends there. And that is how I met yourself. The rest is kind of history on that particular side of things, but I've been keeping up with assorted tabletop and LARP stuff ever since. But out of all of it, LARP is probably my passion out of a lot of them. I do not get keen for tabletop as much as I get keen for LARP.
So, for those who are like, I don't know what that means, like, what is LARP? And
LARP stands for live action role playing. So the easiest way I've kind of found to describe it to people who already know tabletop role playing games like ye olde Dungeons and Dragons is that rather than sitting around a table with spreadsheets rolling dice, you are actually dressing up as the heroes with foam swords and hitting the monsters yourself. A lot of the background elements you're going to be familiar with if you know stuff like D&D, so that part is fine. It's quite immediately transferable in terms of the background stuff. So anything you want to do after that is entirely your call. The biggest difference ends up being that rather than one DM trying to manhandle a group of 4 or 5 people through a setting and campaign, it's here is a setting, everyone is a player apart from the monsters who show up every now and then, go! So that's where you end up with interesting like player-led organisations and groups like the group that we're in, or the guilds that we're kind of part of, which is a separate thing. I'm going to be referring back to the Lorien Trust, the system that we're both in a lot, just because it's an easy frame of reference. So the larger ones, again, DLT, because we're both in the UK, Empire and Curious Pastimes are another one. We're talking like 2,000 to 3,000 people, which is a maniacal number for anyone who's not used to it. But it can honestly just end up being like 15 people having fun in the local park. It's all fine. Like, just because one is bigger than the other doesn't necessarily make one inherently superior. Just how well the players get on, how well the world kind of ends up going, and the kind of plot you're doing. So there is a lot of leeway and flexibility for what's possible in LARP.
see, I think that's actually quite a sort of concise and perfect description, really. I got into LARP because I sort of started doing D&D first, but I was hanging around with like friends of mine who were quite older, so when I was a teenager, and they used to do the LT as well, so, you know, me being a kid was like, that sounds really cool, can I go along? And I think I was sort of 15 when my parents I managed to persuade my parents to just let me loose in a field near Derby for 5 days on my own. And yeah, it was awesome. It's quite different to D&D. I sort of tend to describe it to people as like a cross between D&D and a festival.
You would not be wrong with that. That feels definitely about right.
Or as a mate of mine used to
Definitely
say,
about
cross-country pantomime.
I think I know that guy.
So, like, I guess ways it sort of differs from D&D, really, and it's still got the same role-playing elements in that. But you are...
So So the way that I was kind of interpreting that is like a lot of systems will have skills that your characters can do. It's kind of similar to the leveling up process of D&D or other kind of role playing games. There's a lot of similarities on a psychological level. Like you have acquired a new skill because you've done X, Y, Z. Like whether it's just training with some people, whether it's I've developed this on my own because you've got some background points that you can invest in it, or similar kind of role playing reasons as to why you may have ended up acquiring it. There is usually a method for a character to become more powerful the longer they end up surviving. So in that particular aspect, I would say, yeah, there's an overlap to D&D. It's not really a downside. It's more the biggest thing to end up keeping in mind is that despite that, no one in the field is like the same level truly ever. Like everyone is operating at different levels because
Yeah.
you have people. You'll have people who've been playing the same character for 15 to 20 years. You'll have people who, like us, who have been playing the same character for like 8 to 10 years, somehow surviving. And then you'll be the new guys who like this is their second or fifth session and they're still relatively squishy. So it is a giant plethora of just different people and different skills. But again, it's all fine. There are niches to be filled everywhere. There are different ways that you can play things. There is no right or wrong way to LARP, which is a big statement that I want to underline there before anyone gets concerned.
Yeah, that's an interest. I like that. That's an interesting point. 'Cause in a D&D, I mean, I'm the forever DM guy in D&D. I do play the odd games, but I'm always it's all very much about you building your encounters for the not D&D but other systems as well. You got to build the encounters relevant to the level of the characters, and it's super rare for anyone in my games to be of a different level to each other. Even if someone's character dies, they just come back as a character of the equivalent level, maybe with a few less magic items, but. So you kind of build everything around that. But like you say, with LARP, it's completely different. Like when you've got some people who, have been playing the same character sort of 15, 20 years, they're the game's equivalent of like the 20th level characters. So I sometimes feel like that might be a bit of a barrier to entry for some people, but just...
It can be. I know that a friend of mine who ended up joining our group a couple of years ago at this point, I can't remember how many, did kind of phrase that as a bit of a frustration he was having, in the respect that he's very new and squishy, and all the enemy encounters seem to be kind of leveled for people who were more developed than his character was. And it is a perfectly fair comment. Like, there are some systems which are still kind of trying to figure out that perfect balance. The one that we're in kind of manages it in having a couple of very big snacky monsters for all the high level players to go after, a load of kind of like mid-range monsters for all the mid-range players like ourselves to go after, and then you have the absolute basic grunt spod who just you hit it 4 times and it's falling and it falls over. So it kind of manages it, but I'm not going to end up denying that like there have been a couple of times that I'm here like, hang on, this is a bit too hard and snacky. Like, I'm a little bit worried that the new guys are just going to get absolutely chewed up, and it's... So, some things are never perfect, but I freely agree with what you're saying there.
I think the monsters is a fun one to go into as well, because in a tabletop game, your Games Master, Dungeon Master controls all the monsters. But in LARP, like, actual people will come and attack you in your camp.
Yes.
This is sort of something I get across to people. Like, what, you mean you can be just sat having a cup of coffee in the morning and somebody will rock up to your camp and try and hit you with swords? Like, yes.
Yes. It is quite hilarious. Like, that has quite literally happened, I'm pretty sure, to both of us. I have been standing at the back of our faction, eating a panini because I've literally just got back with food, watching about 30 monsters attacking the front gate, and just like, I'm not getting involved, I have food. It absolutely does happen.
The system we're in, you volunteer to be a monster, so there's kind of like an unwritten expectation that if you're going to play for the weekend, you should devote at least a little bit of your time to being the baddies as well, so everyone gets a good game, really. And I find and it's not necessarily just monsters to attack, but the same as the combat like social NPCs and non-combat NPCs. Because
Yes.
do you feel like the actual role playing element of it is a bit more in depth in LARP than you would say it was in tabletop?
It can be yes as well as no. Actually, no. I would actually no. On reflection, I would actually quickly rewind myself there and say yes. I would deliberately state it as more engaging, because with tabletop role playing, with stuff like D&D, the interactions you have are either between your own party, which half the time is strategizing how you're going to tackle XYZ problem, so half of it is out of character, and then the other half is between them and the GM, which is a bit different to... So, for very quick context for this scenario, I am now a sergeant of the Militia Guild, which is basically the fantasy police, and sometimes I do a patrol around most of the different factions and say, hi, I'm here to collate information with you guys. So I am quite literally going to other players and going, hey, what information have you got about what's coming? Here's what we have, what matches up, what's new to you. And like, that is roleplay. That is like a lot more consistent roleplay between myself and other people, and a lot of them I just genuinely do not know. It'll be my first time meeting them, but it doesn't change it, and it makes it honestly a bit more varied, because if you know a GM, like knowing what I know of yourself, Dread, like I can get an idea as to the kind of NPCs you might roll out. For example, I can very easily see bards showing up a lot, but with other people, again, I don't know who I'm meeting. I don't necessarily know if their character's going through an incredibly tough time and they don't want to be having a chat with a militia sergeant right now.
Yeah.
There might be another one who just, I don't like the militia because we don't like the law. It's like there's any number of different methods and interactions, as well as any number of different gate guards going, I don't know if they're in right now. Please come in, important guests, have a drink. So, like, there is a lot of interaction going on, so it can be quite fascinating.
I love
how
that thing.
Few NPCs. There are.
Yes, it's very true. Yeah, because so the whole thing about the factions and the Lorien Trust, I'm sure a lot of them run the same. So there's like different subgroups within the game, and like
Yes.
there's like a group of generally volunteers who play like the sort of the commander of the nation you all represent, and different camps can be representatives of different nations. And you'll sort of have people who are staff and they're referees within the game, so like the LARP equivalent of a DM, because they're there to make sure that people are following the rules, and if there's any problems come up, they're there to sort of deal with it, and they're there to brief the monsters and brief the NPCs and all that sort of stuff. To just some context on that one, but I find myself, and I love this at LARP, when you've just been sat around for an hour, just because it is a festival, and it's not like a D&D game where you play around a table for 2 hours. These usually can last like a whole weekend, and you are
They
generally
frequently do.
and you are in character from like morning till night. Basically, there's only a small window where you're not actually in character, and I love it when you can just sit around and you realise that you've just been chatting shit in character for like 2 hours.
It's genuinely quite great. Like, some of my fondest memories, like, are just with my character and either other members of the militia or the group that we're part of, or just other groups within the faction or whatever, just chatting about bollocks, or like the situations where like I've been sitting around a table and my character's had the realization of like, I've genuinely been in a state of non-stop war with some group in the world for 8 solid years. I have a lot of problems. Just the eyes glazing over as he suddenly starts remembering the war against the Jade Empire, kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
All of that.
Yeah,
That was good. That was good.
but I guess a lot of characters then. I don't know how many like you've actually had, because you played smaller LARPs as well, haven't you? But because you've done, have you done like the little? Because I played like a few sort of cyberpunky futuristic ones where sort of maybe 20, 30 people, not
yeah,
like the
kind
massive
of.
festival systems. Like,
I haven't played any of the other large systems yet. Admittedly, that's more due to, okay, so some of them just overlapping with our main system. Other one is just not quite being able to get the usage of Holiday going on. The other one that I'm part of, that I need to get back to, is a small little system called Hero Fest, which was in Wales. It's changing location, but it's quite nice. There's about 300 people. It's a lot lighter on the rules side of things in comparison to our main one. And they allow multiple characters per player. You can basically just choose, I'm going to rock up as this guy this weekend. So it actually ends up allowing a bit more flexibility with what you're playing, which has ended up resulting in some incredibly weird and wacky weekend.
Yeah. How many characters have you had in the LT system then? Because I know you're playing Thanis currently. You're on your first
He is
character
my original
still.
character. He is
Wow.
my original character in the
No,
LT. I do
that's-
not know how he has lived that long.
That is super rare for that many years.
I know. I am very aware of this. Like, I've got into the situation through a couple of skills right now, and a couple of just shiny extra bits, I am incredibly difficult to kill in any of the main 4 events. Due to recent rules changes, it's slightly easier, but I am genuinely impressed I survived the first few years. Probably because we only showed up to the gathering until we had more money, but that's besides the point.
And like, credit to you as well. You are like out of character a pretty decent sword fighter, because I've sparred against you enough times to know now I'm outclassed in that respect. Cause like, so that's just anything in LARP. Like maybe like, people who don't know about the LARP combat, so it's not for everyone, but I fucking love it. Like it's definitely.
Oh
a
no!
point
You
for
are
me.
completely right. Like one of the secondary things that I kind of low key love, as this kind of interesting kind of balancing method, is the difference between what we kind of understand as soft skills and hard skills.
Mm-hmm.
So for context, soft skills are this is the stuff that you can do on paper. So in D&D, it would literally be the stuff written down in your character sheet. Your hard skills is literally how good are you, the player, with a sword, following the rules of the actual system. Like for us, it's basically
or running
don't
away, or
like how physically good are you? And I can appreciate that for some players who may have difficulties in those regards due to minor or severe disabilities, that some of the combat side isn't necessarily for them. But there are other ways by which they can kind of contribute to what's going on. Which is nice.
It's just one facet of the system, isn't it? You can have a good time while not participating in combat at all.
There are so many different ways that you can end up contributing to things, like if you are not physically capable or confident in the literal combat. Like me, I consider myself a decent fighter who's just relatively fast.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of people are going to end up disagreeing, like the people who know me on that side. I just don't like tooting my own trumpet in that one. But like, yeah, I've gone up against some people who are scary good in terms of actual sword skills. You will have as well, like anyone who's been on the field will end up knowing the kind of people where you look at it like, in character, I should fight you, but out of character, I know you, and no...
I love that. Actually, it's I'm a nerd. Like we're all nerds. We play these games. It's a geeky thing to do.
Absolutely.
But I quite like being a geek who knows how to use like bladed weaponry. Like this is something that I enjoy.
It is one of the very, very, very rare things I have to remember. Like, if I end up getting threatened in real life, all I need is
zombies.
a stick the right length.
Yeah, and what are we going to do in a zombie apocalypse? I've been preparing for this shit for years.
I have a very specific set of skills.
So I should really grab some. I should have got some light weapons prepped. They're all over there in the corner behind me, but they are like they are fiberglass weapons. Well, it's got a fiberglass core or a
give me
fiberglass
a half second.
That's
give me
okay.
a half second.
So the weapon is basically like a fiberglass core wrapped in foam and latex, so they are safe to hit people with, and you can kind of take like multiple hits from one of these, and it's completely fine. Like it's there we go. There's one. Oh, nice.
There's a spear. I got hands of a spear. Thanks, love. So I'm trying to make sure you can see enough of it.
Yeah, I can see it fine. Yeah.
Dread's saying, like, it's nicely bendable. It is quite literal foam that you can squeeze. There's a solid core in the middle that you can just... It's basically just structural. But the entire point is that this is a glorified just bonking stick with a nice shape attached to it, purely for visual aesthetic. Like, if... I know people are going to end up, like... It is not reenactment. We're not swinging around actual, literal metal weapons. We're just there to have fun. We're just there for the visuals.
And there is a rules system behind it as well. So it's this.
Yes.
Like it's very different to D&D, because D&D's got the sort of thing where you roll dice for damage and there's a lot more maths involved. But like sort of, if you try and think like on paper, if your character's got like 80 hit points, it's quite easy to subtract the number and to keep a running tally of this. But in the field when you're LARPing, you've mostly got your in-character kit with you. You won't really be carrying any sort of out-of-character items. So you tend to have, like, body hits. And the idea with a sword is, like, somebody might have, I don't know, like 2 hit points on the head. And so if you hit them on the head twice, they're going to fall unconscious or die, is the kind of the rule of it.
That's a system that we know. So, like, every limb
that's the one we're used
having... Every limb has hit points, and then if you're wearing armor, that's a different layer of hit points. So, like, I wear a leather hat. Apparently, that counts as medium armor. So, I have 3 hits on my head normally. I then have 3 hits from the hat on top of it. So that totals 6. There are skills which can go through that. There are skills which can just destroy the armor. Like, there are a variety of different skills. But at the end of the day, the crux is, as you've correctly pointed out, every attack for us is literally just, I have been hit on the head once, so that is 1 hit. So, think from what conversations I've had with other friends of mine who have tried other systems, there are ones which do lean more into the, like, the hits can do multiple hits per hit, and different effects and everything. And I am quietly at the background just going like, I do not have the prerequisite master's mathematics degree to be able to do it this quickly. So, like, for some people, those will end up working more than for others. It is... I think at the end of the day, it's about finding a system which feels right for you, the player. But in terms of, like, in the field and managing hits, I've got to the point where I just run things through by feel.
Yeah.
If the battle is so fierce that I can't literally count, okay, that's 1, okay, that's 2, okay, that's 3, and then
you go for like the theatric death. If you've been surrounded by 5 people who are hacking you to bits, like, you know what, guys, I'm done for.
You allow yourself to extend it a bit for a dramatic last stand, and then you fall over completely gone. Like, yeah, absolutely. There are plenty of drama moments.
I was going to go on about the characters, I suppose, because we've got a little bit of time left. So I was going to go on about like the characters briefly, like they're sort of making the characters, and then like any sort of, if there's any cool moments that stand out to you.
Ooh,
so like
cool
you're on your first character, so like when you were building this character to begin with, when you first started, is that the direction you imagined he would have taken sort of now, 8-10 years later?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, when I created the character, I did what kind of I understand as many people's first time LARP character was, being I basically just made it me, but somewhere else entirely. So just me in the world of Adrea, where the Lorien Trust is taking place, and kind of just figuring out what's going on. Just as things developed, I kind of like, okay, maybe I'll have this as his backstory, and that kind of stuff. So, character development is interesting, because I mentioned before he's ended up being through a fair number of wars. So, my character has the skill immunity to fear. So, fear is like an effect that can be just yelled, like mass fear, and everyone starts running away. If you've got immunity, you don't run away. And at this particular point, the entire reason I have immune to fear is because the character is so jaded from being through so many wars and seeing so much stuff that just nothing phases him anymore. Like, he's just like, okay, right, it's demons again, here we go. Or just like, elementals again? God, give us a change, lads. But no, I didn't quite expect him to end up getting to the point where he is now, being like this he's one of the kind of core members of our group, which surprised me. So when I say our group, I mean the small little gaggle of people we have inside this nation, and then being sergeant, which is like the mid-rank in the militia guild. Like, that was a pleasant surprise. I'm not going to say it wasn't welcome. So, like, all things considered, the bits that stick out to me are either the accomplishments and the progression he's made from being like a basic nobody to actually being kind of important, which is nice, or it's all been stuff on the battlefield. And battlefield moments can end up being anything from, I can't believe I'm fending off literally 4 people at once right now, which happened during the war with Cathay. Like, the Jade Emperor and his retinue just rocked up to the Jackals faction, our national faction, and just started punching their way through. I used to remember backpedaling while fending 4 people off. That's it. It's a small little thing, but I'm impressed I did it. Or it was right on, I think, my first ever event in the LT with the Gathering, where 4 different factions joined up after the honor battle to punch the Vipers in the face. And that involved walking up the hill, and you know the hill.
Oh yes. It's that's a quick point on that one. So there's like player-led plot and like game-led plot. So sometimes if enough, it sounds like mob rule really. If enough people in the LARP system, enough characters want to go and do a thing, they are going to go and do a thing. And sometimes there are kind of in-nation fight, there's sort of like disagreements and things go on. Sometimes you just see everyone go, "Oh, that wasn't in the scripts. What are they going to do?" Yeah.
Oh no, it's quite hilarious. Like one of the bits going off that one, which ends up sticking out from it was either the last year or it was just before the pandemic. But the militia saw 2 of the factions declaring war on each other, kind of semi out of the blue, although according to those factions it had been bubbling slightly along, and it was over within the space of a night.
Right.
Because we ended up acting as the neutral party. Like, okay, this is an official declaration of war. Right, you sign here. You sign here. Okay, here's how it's gonna work. And that was mad. But you're right. Like, I'm pretty sure that wasn't in the GM plot script for the year. Like 2 factions just having a go at each other on one night. It's quite insane sometimes.
It's one of those hobbies, isn't it, where like you can't really explain it. It sounds like you should be able to explain it to people quite easily, but you really can't, because everybody who goes is going to have such a completely different experience, even though the same stuff is happening to everyone.
But that is the beauty of it. You literally cannot experience everything at one event. You can't experience, like, if you're again a member of the Jackals like we are, you can't necessarily experience the drama going on between the bears and the dragons.
Oh, in a totally different camp, totally different people.
In a totally different camp, in a totally different field, there's drama going on. Like, you may not necessarily know about a werewolf pack, which has ended up just getting beef with a vampire coven because someone may have drank the wrong person's blood by accident. Like, there's all these 101 little tiny subplots which you don't necessarily end up being aware of. But that in itself is great, because it means you can just end up chatting and finding absolutely new and amazing stuff. And sometimes it's like, oh, that's why that happened. So it's genuinely fantastic for that.
There's a cat there, look. A wild cat appeared.
There's a cat there. Meow.
Yeah, I suppose our characters as well are sort of quite different, aren't they? Because I'm on my, I think, 6th character in LT. I was doing the one finger on the other hand, but it was down there, so you couldn't see it. So it looked like I was going, I'm on my 6th character. So, like, I started off as some, like, I don't know, I can't remember what it was. I just showed up with, like, a couple of shirts and some very bright coloured trousers, and I had all my hair in little tiny plaits. When I was about 15 years old, and just showed up with my little tent and my borrowed sword. Like, I'm going to be a hero, Mum. And so I played like warrior swords. So I played like I've not recorded that video. I'm going to record that and put it.
Ah.
Yeah, I will do that. But yeah, so I played like warrior sorts, like big heavy armor, wearing the chainmail and the helmets and that sort of thing. I played you can play like wizard types, so you can actually cast spells in the game, and there's like and you get healers as well. So it's almost like you sort of you warrior, wizard, rogue, cleric archetypes, but it's not as restricted in the system where you play because you can kind of mix and match a character out of different bits.
Well, that in its like, I'm gonna use that as a springboard to kind of like use mine for reference. Like, I consider mine to be mildly atypical, considering a lot of stereotypical D&D classes. Like warriors, half the time are either like here are massive armor and big sword, or sword and shield, etc. I play rogue skirmish scum, in the respect that I am dual wielding fencer scum, dressed like an English highwayman in medium armor. So I'm like wearing the equivalent of chainmail while being a speed demon, which is weird. but that's exactly kind of like on point for what you're saying. Like there is no one way to create a class. There is, in fact, technically it's a classless system.
It is a classless
and you kind of
system,
create the you create the classes by going like, okay, I've taken healing and I've taken power and I've taken literally nothing else. So okay, I'm basically a healer.
But yeah, you could be like, I can't decide if I want to be a mage or a healer. Well, you could split your skills and just do both. So you can be like the kind of mix
mage and invoke and like encounter and all the other kind of stuff.
I don't know how to describe my character. Like everyone would say he's a bard, but that's his job. Like that's not necessarily. I think he's just a cleric, almost like a kind of traditional cleric build.
But at the same time though, you're not, because like due to the racial bonuses and everything you've got, like you are also a combat demon because you've got regeneration, you've got natural armor and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah, so
technically your skills are saying you're a healer, but you're walking into combat and annihilating people.
Yeah, because I'm not playing a human. I paint myself purple and put horns on, but it looks like like some kind of weird genie in terms of the light flowing clothes, and everyone thinks I'm a mage. Everyone thinks I'm just going to stand at the back and do mage things, and he's not. He's just he's like a support tank, I guess, almost. It's
yeah, that kind of feels about right for us.
It's a fun game. Yeah, So unfortunately we are coming to the end of the pre-allotted time. It's been awesome chatting to you again, mate. I will see you in like a few weeks for the first event of the year. Before we go though, because like a lot of people make that transition from like tabletop first into LARP. Is there any like advice or tips you would give anyone who's kind of wanting to give this crazy thing a try?
If you want to give LARP a try, by all means give it a shot. Do not worry about like the specifics in terms of like making sure you've got perfect kit or anything going in. If you just want to give it a try, grab yourself a nice generic pair of shoes, generic like non-brand everything, something which wouldn't look horrifyingly out of place, and just give it a try. It'll be your first event. There will be no judgment. If you find you end up liking it, by all means keep going. If you find you don't, every possibility just may not necessarily have been with the right crowd, or maybe you're just not in the right system. So maybe consider like swapping from one faction to the other, seeing what takes you fancy. But absolutely give it a go, and also see if there's anything local to you, because it might surprise you as to how close how close groups are to you, which end up giving it a shot.
Sure. I mean, I think we've all seen videos and like horror stories on LARP and stuff. But I will say one thing: like, so many of my closest friends and like people I've known for a long time are people I've met in the LARP field, and like there are such amazing, genuine, decent, cool people who do this hobby. Like,
absolutely.
Like if you go in just wanting to actually partake and have fun, you will be embraced by the community as it was, and I like that. I think that's pretty cool.
The one thing that I'll say just very quickly for our system and from our experience in that one, like, we do not turn away new players and act snooty or anything. If someone ends up acting snooty, then like 3 people next to them will end up saying like, ignore that guy, come with us, let's get you a beer.
And as I said, there's like 3,000 other people you can go and talk to. It's like,
exactly. Exactly.
In terms of probability, that's good odds. So nice one, Joe. Thanks so much for talking to me. It's been cool. for everyone else.
It has been
Don't
indeed cool.
follow this channel for like more of this kind of stuff. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's very important to like and subscribe. You don't have to like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. So it's goodbye from me, and I'll see you all on the flip side.